about how you can find out about the club, you apply for membership, and encourage you to check us out. So with my little plug for the club there, I'm going to stop talking and have James and Nilo and Rito come up and take over.
Thanks, Holly. So without too much ado, I'll probably ask you to introduce the guys. Unfortunately, we're not really first introduce Alpine, the group I represent. I want to speak on that. Alpine Kenya is an outfit of guys that have a thing for distances during a marathon. Both James Muya and Chiriot are actually part of our group, and actually the guys in class keep going. So I shall introduce the two of them. They need no introduction per se. I think everyone knows Wale, everyone knows Muya, everyone knows Chiriot, but I'll go just a bit back to understand who these two guys are. So I'll start with James Muya. James Muya, in his back days, was a ordinary guy, born in Komorai village in Kiambu, went to middle schools in Komorai, having a brilliant kid, found himself in Mama High School for his higher education, and transitioned to University of Nairobi for his further studies. Before settling into career both outside the country but currently based in Kenya, running businesses both in Nakuru and Nairobi. For those of you who like for that adventure, Muya, he is one guy that is one never goes off. Even on top of Mount Kenya, you see him testing on verticals, I think because of the nature of the business around us. His outdoor profile is quite heavy. As he says, his first ever hike was in 2017 in Kimokiu, that's in Okambani. From there, he went on to summit Mount Kenya a few months later in 2017, and that's when he never went back. He has done among the following: Mount Kenya, Levana, he can't show that over times. Batian, Nelion, he's been out of the country, he's done many quick, 71.34 meters above sea level. He's done Canterbury, 70-10 in 2019. He's been from Maradona Summit, 68-12 in 2012. In 2021, together with Victor, myself, he was in the back of the Cape Town kilometer. He's done the 5 mountains in East Africa in 7 days. I was lucky to be in his company as well. And now, this was his CV a few months ago before he went to his child that you're here to listen to today. So we pick it from there. Another partner in crime was Chiriot. Both achieved Bowling in Nandi County, school in Texas High School in Nandi County, Victoria to Marcelo for his further studies, and he found himself in the city in 2012. Then not hiker, not a runner. But in 2014, he did his first hike to the 13, and straight from that, submitted Mount Kenya a few months later. And from then, he's been to Batia twice, Kilimanjaro 3 times, Rwenzori. He's done ultra runs in Poland, USA, Turkey. He records that his most memorable moments were doing the Mount Kenya 3 routes in 24 hours. He's actually the only one in a group of ultra runners who's managed to run Mount Kenya 3 routes in 24 hours, under 24 hours. He's done together with Victor, Vivian, I can't remember the guy, our guys Travaso, and Arino, our guys Travas, self-supported. He's His dad, Tony Jones, she don't pretend to be not a competent. His other memorable moment, which was witnessed by Freeman, Monia, and Victor, is going blind on top of Kilimanjaro because he forgot his sets or his ships. And he has a new memorable moment which we are here to get the gist part of. So thank you guys, and let's see what that is.
All right. I'm the James. Chariot is not able to be here, and that's a shame because there are some stories I wanted him to tell himself, and I also wanted to hear those stories from his perspective. But hopefully, one of these days we'll meet with him, and he'll be able to give his version. So I'm here just to sort of give a report on Manaslu. Just before we left for Manaslu, I did a presentation to MCK about the climb, but here we are just here to hear what happened, what actually happened on the mountain. So we'll go straight to the presentation. I don't know. No, is it? Here. Okay. So, I don't know. Wait. So, we left Kenya on 8th of September with the aim of summiting this mountain. And the idea was to climb the mountain the traditional way, sort of, without using supplemental oxygen and without using Sherpa support, meaning that we carried everything with us. So the guy we contracted, the operator in Nepal, his job was to get us to the base camp, get us the permits that were required, and then above base camp, he made it very clear that we were on our own. But we had a two-way communication radio just in case we needed something. So we decided to do the mountain this way, because we wanted to experience the mountain and we wanted to learn how it is to climb such a mountain without support. We were curious, quite curious, and so when we arrived on the 9th of September. So we were Team Kenya. We were the only Team Kenya on that mountain, and it was very clear that we were the only black people on that mountain for that season. So it was we were a bit we attracted a bit of attention. Once we landed in Kathmandu, we took the first 2 days to shop and to hire gear, because we didn't have all the gear, and most of the gear, high altitude gear, is a bit expensive. So we thought we should hire like the summit suit, the high altitude tents. I had the high altitude boots. Chariot bought his high altitude boots. initially he was to hire, but we, after visiting like 5 shops, he couldn't get his size that he could hire. So he opted to buy because we are running out of time. And then we hired high altitude sleeping bags. So, and we bought uh, other stuff like cooking gas. We bought the burners, the food, because everything else above this camp was ours to take care of. So on the first day, we took 4 days. We took 4 days from Kathmandu to get to base camp. So day one, we drove for about 11, 12 hours. It's a long way, and the roads are not that great. So we took a lot of time getting to Darapani. And then on the day two is when we started the actual hike to the mountain. 30 kilometers first day, 30 kilometers second day, and a short but a very steep fourth day from Samagon to the base camp. Now, a lot of people opted to fly to Samagon in helicopters because it's the only way. If you don't want to hike, the only other way to access the mountain is to fly in. There are no roads that lead to base camp. So you either hike or fly in, at least to Samagon, and then you do the short, steep hike to the base camp. So, but well, we didn't have that budget for the helicopters, so we decided to walk, and it was a good way to acclimatize, because as we were walking, we got to the highest. The highest we got was Lucky Pass, which is around 5,100 meters, and then we started going down all the way to Samagon, which is about 3,800. So it was also a way of acclimatizing in the lower altitudes. The base camp is at around 4,800 meters, and the approach to base camp, it's very scenic, very, very scenic. And I think we used part of the route that forms the Annapurna circuit and is arguably the most scenic Himalayan circuit. So if you ever want to go for a scenic circuit, this is one of the most scenic. So part of the route we use the Annapurna circuit route. It's actually very scenic, and at some point we were able to see other peaks like Himlung from the back, Annapurna 1, Annapurna 2, and other high but unnamed peaks, because I think in Nepal there are so many high peaks, some of them they don't even bother naming them. So, I think this is Himlan from the back, the technical side, and this is the approach to the base camp. This photo. There's a small town here that is the Samagon. That's the last small settlement before you hike up to the base camp. Now, this is the base camp. Base camp is like a small city. These are like a city built in a few days and dismantled in a few days after like 30 or so days. So you have the big outfitters like Seven Summits, Elite Expert, doing these huge tents with like lounge areas and everything. But we were on a budget, so this this was our base camp. This was my tent. Cherio's tent. This our dining, our dining area, and this was the kitchen, and that was our base camp. We were joking with Chariot that we settled in the Kibera of the base camp. Because the other areas were quite inviting, but also there was a cost to that. So it's at the base camp. There's a lot of um, uh, apprehension, especially when you arrive, and then from here now you see the mountain, and you start wondering exactly where the route is, because you can't imagine yourself climbing here. You start wondering exactly where is the route, and then someone tells you there's actually a route somewhere. So we arrived at the base camp at around in the afternoon at around 2. Set up the base camp. It wasn't set because that outfitter, we were the only 2 clients on that mountain. So we left Kathmandu with him. We arrived together at the base camp. Normally, with the big outfitters, you get to the base camp, everything is set, you are shown your tent, and there's no waiting period. But for us, we actually helped the outfitter set up our base camp, set up the tents, because he didn't have any other clients. So there's no, and I think it was also good for us to experience some of these things instead of getting things already set and you don't understand exactly how the base camp works. So we had to find a good spot and help him set the tent. Then when we arrived, so these are tents, and we carried 2 flags, and we wrapped one of the flags on one of the tents, and that's how they knew where the Kenyans were. Because actually, when we were climbing, and they would see us, and they would say, I've seen your tent. We had very unique tents. If you look at the other tents, they are like houses, you know. But as I said, we are on a budget, so so we left this flag there for the entire period. It marked our embassy. So the following morning, now let me explain something. We arrived on the mountain on the 14th of September. By that time, a lot of clients of the other commercial outfitters had started acclimatizing, and actually the weather was good even for a summit. Because I think the day after we arrived is when the ropes were fixed to the top. So we didn't want to waste any time, because we also understood the mountain doesn't give you so much weather window. So the night after we arrived, we started our climb, our acclimatization climb. And because we arrived a bit late, even in Kathmandu, we did our puja ceremony in Kathmandu, because we understood we may not have enough time to do the puja ceremony at the base camp. But then once we left that day, we had 3 guys at the base camp. That's the outfitter, the chef, and his assistant. So we were just a group of 5 people total. So we left the 3 guys at the base camp. So the day we left, they did the puja ceremony on our behalf. So we left base camp at we left base camp at around 4 in the morning. So this is the first day of climbing, and we arrived at this point. This is the crampon points. After climbing for around 2 hours, we arrived at the crampon points, where now the ice and snow starts. So so we got to this is the walk to the first camp. We arrived. This is the first guy we met, and at Camp One. And when he saw us, the first question he asked us is whether we knew KG. And we took this photo, and he sent it to KG. And then he told us, "Oh, KG says hi." Now, when we were coming down, and he made us aware that if we needed anything, he can help us because they climbed with KG on Everest when KG was there. So now this is Camp One. Camp One is at 5,800 meters. And so we went, set up our tent. Following morning, it was a bit snowy, and so our climbing plan was we do the first acclimatization. So the idea was to climb day one, climb to Camp One, sleep there. Day two, climb to Camp Two, sleep there. Day three, climb to Camp Three, sleep there, then go down to base camp. But then we were climbing without shepherds, and then we realized those whatever we were carrying was quite heavy. We were carrying our tents, we were carrying our food, we were carrying our gas, and then we were carrying like extra food because we didn't want to carry food when we were doing the summit climb. So our bags were quite heavy. So when we got to Camp One, we were quite tired. The following morning, we decided to change the plan. Instead of going with everything to Camp Two, we decided to go to Camp Two and come back down to Camp One and sleep there. Because we thought if we were to dismantle the tent, and then we ideally would have started climbing early in the morning, like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. But we found that we couldn't just wake up and start dismantling the tent at 4 a.m. So we had to wait until at least 6, 7, and that now changed our plan. So the following day, instead of now carrying the tent, we went to Camp 2 and climbed just a little bit higher, more than Camp 2, then came back down and slept at Camp 1. So here is the chariot preparing the platform to set up the tent at Camp 1. And now the green tent is ours. Now, I don't know why everybody was climbing with a yellow tent and we were climbing with a green tent. It was a very unique tent because it was of a different color than everybody else. Probably yellow is more visible. So when we have to create a nice platform, and then you try to shelter it from wind by building a nice wall. So, and that takes a bit of time. The tent also helps you work at altitude, and that is also good for acclimatization. This height is the highest chariot has ever slept before this climb. And that was something because the highest I've ever I had slept before this was 6,100. I don't think he ever slept on Kilimanjaro. So it was the highest he has ever slept. And that was also a bit of a concern for both of us, but something he managed to do. So the next morning we went to, this is the route to to Camp 2 from Camp 1. It's full of crevasses. It's quite an interesting route. The route 1 and Camp 4, that is where the climbing on this mountain happens. Between Camp 1 and Camp 4, it is short but extremely steep, and a few places are a bit technical. And this is where the exposure to objective hazards like avalanches and extreme winds happen. So now this section was an interesting one for everyone. This is the last 100 before you reach Camp 2. And it's a proper ice wall. So this rope is for the guys descending, this is for the guys going up. But this rope was also used by a lot of people to pull their bags. A lot of people could not climb here with their bags on their back because of the weight and the steep. It's actually a vertical wall, and this section here is actually like an overhang, a nice overhang. So it becomes a bit of a challenge, even with a Jumar, to get over that overhang. So at some point, people would either decide to leave their bags here and tie them to this rope. When you get up here, you pull with your Jumar and get your bag. We did that once when it became a bit difficult. So this is Camp 2. Camp 2 is set at 6,800 meters, and we got a nice spot right next to one of these big outfitters. And one of the things we were doing when we got to this camp is to start talking to guys around, just to get some information like how the weather is, and try to figure out their summit plans and all. And these guys were willing and ready to give us some information. So now, the plan was we get to Camp 3, sleep, come back down to base camp, rest for 2 days, then go for another acclimatization climb up to, we touch Camp 4, and then go back to base camp and rest again as we watch the weather. Now, initially, our plan was to summit on the 28th of September, because when we projected the weather, that was also a good time. But as time went by, we kept checking the weather on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, because the weather was being updated every 2 hours. And we got to the third day of our acclimatization, we took now the tent with everything to Camp 2. So we left the tent, the food, the gas, our summit suits in Camp 2. And then went all the way back to base camp. Now, when we went back to base camp, the plan was to rest for 2 days and then do another acclimatization. As we were there, we found the weather improving for the days we were supposed to do the second acclimatization, but on the summit, the weather was clearing, and we started toying with the idea of making a summit push without a second acclimatization. But then at that point, Cheriot had symptoms of pulmonary edema. You know, that's where you breathe and your lungs start making bubbly noises. So luckily, we had carried high altitude medicine, Diamox, and so took the medicine, took some time, but instead of 2 days at the base camp, we decided to take a third day, and as we asked each other whether we are ready to go for the second time on the mountain. So luckily, within the 2 days, he recovered well enough uh, we decided to give him an extra day. Then we left for the mountain. When we were leaving base camp for the second time, we left with two plans. The first plan was to try and push for the summit. We were aware that we were not well acclimatized, but the weather was very good at that point. Very. We left the mountain for the second time. We left the base camp on Thursday. I think on Thursday. Look here. When we were the first time we were checking the weather, the winds were 20 kilometers an hour, 15, 20, and by the time we were leaving, the wind had gone down to 5. So the weather was improving. You look at this night, the snow projection was supposed to be 27 centimeters. By the time we were leaving, it had gone down to 1 centimeter. So the weather was improving. Now, the thing with these high mountains, it will give you so much time to climb. After that, when the weather changes, it changes. So now we started toying with the idea, do we climb? And for the second acclimatization, with so much happening at the summit, everybody was pushing for the summit then. The guys who had arrived earlier, they were going for the summit then. So we left with two plans. We push for the summit. If it's not possible because we were not 100% acclimatized, then we take it as a second acclimatization. So, but we made that decision based on the weather improvement. And then the projection for our 28th weather kept worsening as this 22nd, 23rd became better. So we were trying to see what's best for us. So what happened is we got to, so we left base camp at around 2 a.m. and we skipped camp 1 and went directly to camp 2. Anyway, that's where our tent was. We didn't have a tent at camp 1. So we went to camp 2, and when we were going to camp 2, the plan was the following day take the tent to camp 3 and then try to push for the summit from camp 3. But after arriving at camp 2, we talked and decided carrying the tent to camp 3 may be a bit of, by that time we had decided we try for the summit. So we thought if we carry the tent and everything to camp 3, we may arrive at camp 3 when we are quite tired. So we decided to push for the summit from camp 2. Well, that was not the best of decisions because we forgot, or well, we overlooked the fact that we are climbing without oxygen. There was a huge, when the first time we arrived at camp 2, Nims, the celebrity climber, was coming down, and he was sort of intrigued by these two Africans. So he said hi, and I told him we are trying to climb without oxygen, and he was like, have you slept at camp 3? No. Make sure you sleep at camp 3 and get to camp 4 and come down. That's the only way you're going to do it without oxygen. Same case, I think we were told that by like 3-4 people, but Chariot figured that we can handle a long day. He had, we can actually be out there so long as the weather is okay and we are warm. We can be out there for up to 36 or 48 hours. So we decided to push for the summit without sleeping at Camp 3 or touching Camp 4. So we started to push for the summit the following day at 5 p.m. So we left Camp 2 at around 5 p.m. The plan was we carry the gas and the burner and the small camping sufuria. Then we get to Camp 3, we take like an hour's break, making tea, hot water and all, and then we proceed. And that's what we did. Got to Camp 3, made, I think after an hour, we started to push. By then, I think it was around 8 p.m. The guys who were summiting with oxygen had started climbing from Camp 3. So some guys were pushing for summit from Camp 3, some were going to Camp 4 and push for the summit from there. But most of them were doing it from Camp 3. So they had already started. So we were playing catch up then. What we found was that between Camp 3 and Camp 4, the terrain is extremely difficult and hard, and we took time. We had projected that we would be at the summit in the morning we left at 5 p.m. We thought by morning 6 or 7 we'll be at the summit, and we arrived at Camp 4 at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. is when we arrived at Camp 4. Camp 4 it is at 7,400 meters. Now, we have left our tent at Camp 2. Here is what Cheriot was calling Camp 4 tent drama. Because we arrived at Camp 4 in the morning, and then we consulted. The good thing is that myself and Cheriot were constantly evaluating the situation, because for this particular climb, this the second time on the mountain, we had the option of going back and counting it as the second acclimatization climb. So we were not too much under pressure. But I think when we arrived at Camp 4, we realized we have expended so much effort to get to Camp 4, and so long as we kept feeling well, there's no health risks, we thought we can push. So we decided not to continue with the summit push for that day, because if we proceeded, we probably would have had a late evening summit, and that may have, we didn't want to be caught up in the evening mountain weather, which normally is very unstable. So we couldn't handle being on the summit at 5 p.m. That day. So we were faced with a dilemma. Do we go back to Camp 2, or do we hang around Camp 4? For the entire day and the summit. The people summiting from Camp 4, they normally start their summit push at midnight. So we had to wait up to midnight. And this was 6 a.m. Now, Camp 4 is at 7,400 meters and is extremely windy. Even during the day, you stay inside the tent. It's very exposed, very windy, very exposed, very cold. So I told Cheriot, maybe we can borrow a tent. Now, because of the height and no very few people get to come for when they are summiting. No one sleeps there to acclimatize unless now you are doing like a solo climb or you are doing without oxygen. But most of the clients just get there to spend the night, midnight, you start summiting. So the commercial companies, they put very few tents at Camp 4. You may find I would say like um, NIMS company, Elite Expert. He says they had like over 90 clients, but on Camp 4 they only had 5 tents. So they had staggered their summit so that only the tents are just enough for the people going to the summit. So the first guy we asked, what first shepherd, we said, okay, can we use your tent for the day, and probably the first part of the night, and 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 he went mad. Like, what are you doing, or at this height without a tent? You should go back to base camp. And like he was very hostile. But later we realized he was hostile because he probably understood the risk more than we did, and he couldn't understand how we are there without a tent. So he said, you should plan these things well in advance. You can't be here without a tent. You can't stay here in the open. You have to go back to base camp. Well, we started negotiating with Chariot. Do we go back? Do we stay here? What do we do? We asked another guy. He said, I would love to accommodate you, but I don't have the resources. I don't have a tent. I have, there were some clients coming. He had 2 tents, one for the shepherds, one for the clients. So we asked if we could share the shepherd's tent. All we wanted actually at that point was, we didn't even want to sleep. We just wanted somewhere to sit and shelter from the wind. But we tried to get a tent for like 2-3 hours. And so we agreed with Chariot, if we don't get a tent by midday, we go back. So, well, we tried every few hours, a shepherd would come, coming from Camp 3, and we would approach him, do you have a tent? Most of them were actually coming to deposit supplies for their clients and go back. So we were thinking they were coming with tents, and then we can help them set up and and sleep. They were just coming with oxygen tanks to deposit and go back. So there were no much resources. So in the end, I approached Elite Expert. I asked them for a tent. They said you can use one tent, but there are some clients coming at from 2 p.m. They will start arriving. So when they start arriving, you must vacate the tents. So we used that tent for a few hours. We cooked. We took a nap. Just when we were getting relaxed, the clients started arriving. And we had to move out. Now, at that point, I noticed there was a small one-man tent at a corner that no one was bothering with. And I kept an eye on it. And and I told Chariot, if no one is coming to this tent, we will use this tent. But around three, I think Chariot told me, I think we are not getting a tent. Let's go back to Camp 2. Then he said, oh, we can wait a bit and see. what happens. We were like, we had this thing of, yes, we can go back to camp 2, but if we have a chance, let's just take it now. Our biggest worry was being exposed too much at that altitude in the open, because most of the time when we were not moving around looking for tents, we were just sitting on some rock somewhere and you know, and trying to listen to our bodies. We were worried that the overexposure may, you know, we may have altitude stuff. And remember that this is the first time we are at that height. We've never been at 7,400 before. The highest I've ever been before that was 7,134. So 7,400 was a new height for me. It was a new height for Chariot. And actually for Chariot, the difference in the height, in the altitude was a little bit much. So I went to that small tent and opened it. There was nothing inside. There was no sleeping bag. There was nothing. It was empty. And I took my cooking stuff, started cooking. And then at around, we just decided, let's try to hang around. If worst come to worst, we'll just get into someone's tent. We'll figure out something. We'll fight if we have to. But I think we had gotten to a point where physically we are feeling okay. We are not sure what will happen in 2-3 hours time, but for now we are okay. So if we can use this chance to summit, then let's use it. So at 6, everyone started sleeping because now we had a midnight start, and that no one touched that tent. Every other tent was full. There was one small tent that was not being used, so I told Chariot, let's sleep here. If the owner comes and gets us here, we'll figure out what. But all this time we were ready to pay. Every shepherd we approached, we told them we are ready to pay for the tent. Like they charge $200 per tent for the season. We were ready to pay that, at least to use it even if for a few hours, because the thought of going back to, you know, we've spent the whole night climbing to come for. So the thought of coming back was a bit uninviting. So we actually slept, and then there were guys next to us. We just asked them, do you know the owner of this tent? Yeah, he's our friend. He's coming back. He's coming back to this camp tomorrow at 2 p.m. So we decided, fine, we are okay. So we were comfortable. We moved in with everything, with our bags, with everything, and now we are at home. And then we were like, once we are done, we'll try to find the owner of this tent and appreciate him. If he wants to charge us, we pay. And we slept. The idea was wake up at some minutes to midnight because we were ready. And now midnight we start the summit push. At exactly 10:03 p.m. Because I looked at the watch. I heard some noises around the tent, and I thought probably he's one of those guys. And then I heard someone opening the tent, and a huge and a deep Russian voice was like, "What are you doing in my tent?" That guy had just arrived from Camp 3. There were 2 guys, so he was clearly irritated. Luckily, I know 1 or 2 Russian words. And I just asked him, I just told him Privyat, which is how are you in Russian. And he, like you could hear the calm in his voice return. So I told him, no, no problem. We are just going to vacate the tent. Your friends told us you are not coming, but here you are. So so we actually now vacated the tent. It was at 10 p.m. So when we vacated, you are vacating, you are not ready. Mentally, you are not ready. I mean, it was a bit destabilizing. So when we left, when I saw the time and the guy came and said that is 10, my mind was like, it's just 2 hours to start our summit, so we can even start now. Chariot left and went and started waking up one of the shepherds in one of the tents, trying to tell them the owners have come, can you accommodate us? And then he actually, that is when we realized how scarce the resources at the tent at that camp was, because that guy was actually sleeping at the balcony of the tent, not actually inside the tent. So even accommodating us was impossible. So after like 10 minutes, we decided, you know what, I think we can start our summit push now. And that's what we did. We, at around some minutes before 11, we left our bags there just outside that Russian tent and started our summit push. The only problem with that was we didn't have time to have something for, like, before we left. We didn't have time to heat water, and one of the biggest requirements for such a mountain is hot water in a flask. But I think we thought maybe we can make it. One of the things that gave us a bit of calm was knowing that we could handle a long day in the open. That was the only saving grace, that we could handle a long day. So we were ready for a long, long day. So we started our summit push from Camp 4 again at some minutes to 11. So this is some point between Camp 4 and the summit. It's one of the longest climbs on the route. The route from base camp to the summit is less than 10 kilometers. But this section from Camp 4 to the summit is about 4 kilometers. And you gain 700 meters. So you're from 7.4 to 8.1. So an hour, 2 hours after we started our summit push, we saw, that queue of torches just coming, catching up with us, passing us. And then that's when we realized probably it was premature for us to try the summit push before we were properly acclimatized, because we were moving extremely slowly. And we didn't want to push too much because we didn't know how our bodies will react. There are a few incidences that I'll tell you about that had us on the edge. But everybody who started before, we were among the first to start the summit push anyway, out of the fact that we didn't have accommodation. But everybody came passing us with their oxygen and everything, saying hi and everything. And then they summited and we could meet with them coming down. Luckily, when they were coming down, they offered us tea, they offered us snacks and everything, and wished us well. So eventually, we reached the summit. So this is still the way to the summit. Here we are nearing the summit. Um, so it was a bit and out of your breath. So this is the only selfie we managed to take on that summit. It was extremely windy. The summit is very sharp. You can't stand on the summit itself. You have to be clipped. So it's a very precarious position to be in. So we were not able to take the photos that we would have wanted, but at least we got to the summit. So, well, everybody was leaving or carrying their stuff. There were so many flags deposited there, but those small, these prayer flags. The only two flags that were planted there was the Nepali and an American flag. I don't know why the Americans left their flags there. So these two are my kids' toys that I carried to the summit. And the first thing they asked when I came back is, where are our toys? So I promised to go to the summit with them and come back with them. So now, this was, now concentrate on Cheriot. This was actually after the first acclimatization climb. The faces were just blown up because when you are acclimatizing, your blood gets thicker because of lower levels of platelets, or rather hemoglobin. I don't know, but there is a science behind it. So you get all puffy and all, and so there were so after the summit, there's something I didn't tell. After the summit, we went back down. We arrived back down at Camp 4 at around 4:30, and of course we didn't have a choice. We had to go back to Camp 2. There was no faking it till we made it. We were very clear that we cannot gamble at all at Camp 4. So we had to go back. So when we got back to Camp 4, we made some soup and tea, and we started going back. Yes.
So, how was the weather condition from Camp 4 going up to the summit and coming back?
It was a bit windy, but not too much wind, not that crazy wind. But at the summit, we one of the things that prevented us from taking good photos was the wind. It was extremely windy at the summit. It was clear weather most of the way. It started getting a bit of a whiteout as we approached Camp 4 late in the evening. So we started going down. We knew we had to go back to Camp 2, and it's always good to go back to the lowest camp you can after the summit. So we got to start going down, and now stuff started happening. I think just a few ropes going down from camp to Camp 2. So between Camp 4 and Camp 3, Cheriot lost his glove. I lost my glove. As you are trying to work the rope, and then you decide to remove one of the thick gloves, and the wind or something just happens, and you see it rolling down, and you can't get it. I lost my flask. Cheriot lost his flask. And then, so I was a few meters ahead of Cheriot all the time when we were going up and when we were going down. So at this point, it started getting dark. We are meeting with guys who are now going up, trying now to, pushing for the summit from Camp 3. There was a huge Chinese group, and that slowed our going down because you give priority to the guys going up. So sometimes you would wait at an anchor for so long before they could all pass. So so we took some time going down. It was getting dark, and at some point I looked back. I couldn't see Cherio's torch. There were many torches, but there is a brightness that I could see, and I know this is Cherio's torch. So I couldn't see it, and so I thought probably he's still. I'll just go down a bit further, and that time I was concerned because my glove for the right hand got lost, so I had thin gloves and I couldn't wear the big mints because of the ropes. So my target was to get to Camp 3 at least as fast as possible, to avoid another incident of frostbite. So eventually I got to Camp 3, and when I got to Camp 3, I think I was too tired, and so I knew those Chinese had come from Camp 3. So there were empty tents at Camp 3. So I just got into one without second thoughts and slept. And or rather waited for Chariot. So every time I could hear someone or some steps, I would shout his name, but well, so at some point I slept, and then I woke up. I heard his voice asking for tea from a neighboring tent. So I woke up. Now I got out of the tent, and the first thing he told me, I fell into a crevasse. Uh, so I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, you remember this crevasse that there is a blue rope as okay, I knew the crevasse because I had seen it, but I had seen it just in time. The mountain gave us very good weather, but also that means the crevasses kept expanding because of the melting ice and snow. So this crevasse, when we were climbing up, it was okay. When we were coming down, it had widened. So luckily, when he fell, he was still clipped on the rope. So he managed to pull himself out. Took about 15-20 minutes to get himself out with the Jumar, but at least he managed to pull himself out. So he was like, I fell into a crevasse, and I'm like, wow. Okay. So we luckily there was a tent for 7 summit treks. We got in there, they gave us tea, they were very happy that we summited without supplemental oxygen, but they were not amused that we didn't have shepherds, especially at that height at night. So after a bit of resting, we went down to Camp 2. I think we arrived at Camp 2 at around some minutes past midnight. That's when we got to Camp 2. The plan was wake up early, get down to base camp as fast as possible. But the following morning, it was a complete whiteout at Camp 2. It was snowing. We couldn't get out of our tents. And at around, so we said, let's give it time. At around 11, we'll start packing and going. And we were still at the tent at 3 p.m. because now the snow was becoming more. But when we arrived at Camp 2, actually, we realized some of the big outfitters had started dismantling their tents because most of their clients had summited. So you don't want to be on that mountain in that weather when there's no one around. So we decided we can't sleep again at Camp 2. We had to leave. So we actually packed and dismantled the tent and everything with all this snow falling on us. And we started going down. Uh, for some reason, Cheriot thought we left in the morning because when we were arriving at Camp 1, it was around 7 and it was starting to get dark. And Cheriot said, there's an eclipse. Because it was getting dark, but in his head it was during the day. It was probably at 1 a.m., 1 p.m., sorry. So I'm like, what do you mean there's an eclipse? Yeah, there's an eclipse. You see, it's getting dark. Told him it's 7. How? Like, he thought it was. First of all, I thought, yeah, there's an eclipse. But then I asked myself, an eclipse doesn't happen at night, you know? So, well, we got to the lower Camp 1. We were served some tea by some seven Summit Treks was very good to us for some reason. The guy we left at Camp 3, he radioed Camp 1 and told them when those guys arrive there, give them whatever they ask. We were able to at least have an easier way going down. So we started going first because we thought we would leave earlier from camp 2. So we dressed very lightly for the trek down. But by the time we were arriving at Camp 1, it was already cold. I decided probably I would not change because at this point, I thought I would make a quicker descent to base camp. So we started going down. As usual, Cheriot was behind. So this one, I could go ahead, and when I'm tired, wait for him. So there's this point that I got to, and I think I have a photo here. Oh, this is the route from base camp to Camp 1, and all these are crevasses. You know, you see, all these are crevasses that change depending on the weather, and this is the actual route. You know, so it goes over crevasses, it goes round crevasses. It's a big ice field full of crevasses, and at some point, and by this time it was already dark. At some point, there was one point I got a crevasse that was, well, they had even put a ladder that was not there before because it was quite big. So I arrived there and I thought I stopped to try and figure out if there is a way I could jump instead of using the ladder because sometimes the ladder is a bit uncomfortable. But luckily, I clipped on the fixed rope, and as I was about to jump, the ice beneath me gave way, and I was in the crevasse again. No, not again. Like I was in the crevasse, and now I was hanging by the rope again. I was, and beneath you could feel the water flow. You know, it was deep. So you could feel water flowing beneath. Luckily, I was able I was able to pull myself. Now with my safety was not as long, so I was able to get the fixed rope and pull myself up with the fixed rope, sit on the edge, stand up, and now cross with the ladder. So it is important to clip every time you're passing some of these areas. It's a huge area, and you walk for like 2 hours, dodging all those risks. Yeah, this is the man himself, Nims. he actually gave us some tips. Unfortunately, we did not use them. Uh, there were two incidences that could have probably prevented us from summiting. One was at Camp 4 when I started hyperventilating. When we were sleeping in this small tent, all of a sudden I started sweating, I couldn't breathe. I was like, I started removing the jackets. I rushed out of the tent, and the moment the wind hit me, something like fog cleared, you know. Uh, and then all of a sudden I started feeling cold, and then rushed back into the tent. That was around 8 p.m. I got into the tent and I started feeling hot again, but not too hot. And then when I got back to the tent, Chariot was shaking. Like then he told me, I'm freezing. Now, if you know Chariot, for him to get to the point of telling you he's shaking, he's actually dying because he doesn't, he's, for him to say that it was actually something worrying. So I removed one of my inner jackets, I gave him, and then now he's feeling warm, now I'm feeling cold. uh, and then we said, let's actually at that point we decided, let's give ourselves 1 hour. We feel, we try and see how you're feeling and see if it's worth pushing for the summit. Luckily, the situation improved, and by the time the Russians were coming, we were okay. Um, the other one was, of course, now after we were concerned about, his experience with the pulmonary edema and a bit of nose bleeding because of, I think, some veins or capillaries had busted. So he was nose bleeding for some time. So that was a bit of a concern, but he assured me that he was okay and it's not a health issue. So we were ready to turn back at any moment, especially if it was a health issue. At some point, when we were climbing, I think it was around 10 a.m. when we were doing the summit push, he asked me, "Do you have the strength to get to the summit?" And I told him yes. But what are you saying? Because he was like, "If you have the strength, you go. I will follow." I told him, "No, we have the whole day to climb. So if we have to stay here for 30 minutes, an hour to rest, we do that. But we either go summit together or we go down together." Because we had only each other on that mountain at that point. So we didn't want also to separate, because this height is new for us. We don't know, probably you'll take the next 5, 10 steps and something happens. So luckily we were able to communicate and climb together, and we didn't fight. Yeah. So I think that he was, I think, one of the best partner I could ask for such a mountain, and I relied more on his mental fortitude than his experience, because the way I know him, he can handle stress for longer, even than myself. I was relying more on the little experience I had, but he was relying more on his mental fortitude. And I think that also helped us to try and work and listen to each other, and not to put each other in situations that we both couldn't handle. Yeah, that is the story of exactly what happened. He may have a different version, especially when it comes to comfort, expectations, and willingness to turn back. But I think we managed the risk better than given the circumstances, and we realized climbing without shepherds was actually more of a challenge than climbing without oxygen. And if I'm to climb an 8,000 meter again, I will definitely have shepherds. It's 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 worth it to have shepherds, and by the time you get to the next camp, your tent is set up. At least, even if you cook for yourself, the tent is set up. That's the biggest challenge. Setting up the tent, you take more than 2 hours just trying to get a flat space, and then setting it up, and then dismantling in the morning. So you change your climbing plans because you can't simply wake up at 4 and start bringing your tent down. Yep. I think at this point, I'm ready for your questions.
Well, I think this is a situation that we need to evaluate results. I think we'd like to open the floor for questions.
Victor, I have a follow-up question on exactly what you said. What would you change now for your next 8,000 meters?
No, I think the biggest change, of course, is having shepherds to carry stuff. I've always wanted to do an 8,000 meter without shepherds, and I have done it, and that's enough. I don't think I would be doing it with oxygen because I think I still want to see how far we can push. But I would want to have someone pitch my tent. Yeah.
And learn more Russian.
Sorry?
And learn more Russian.
Yeah, and yeah, but we need to look for that Russian and talk to him.
First of all, congratulations for such a feat and
Thank you.
also for giving us one project learn some Russian. I have two questions. How effective were these suits? And then in terms of navigating, how are you, especially the stage of navigating yourself at night, how are you navigating yourself without meander into the mountain? Then the last one, have you experienced any physiological changes since you came back? I ask this because I think my first time I went to Kilimanjaro, I never used to sweat or never do anything physical. But after that, it's like something happened.
Okay.
You experience a change, yeah, in your breathing.
Okay. The first question was navigation and the suits. Okay. Uh, I think the suits, the ones we rented, they were, I wouldn't say, they were not 100% effective because if you have a summit and you are shivering at 7,400, then there's something wrong with that suit. But we were concerned by the fact that we got there and we had to hire, and getting the right size for a good brand was also a big challenge. At some point, I even thought of just buying a suit, but it's too expensive. So for the next climb, either I have to hire a suit way in advance, and I felt the suits were not. If we were going a bit higher, we may have had some problems with cold. So when I came back to Kathmandu, I actually went to a shop and got fitted a suit, got their contacts, and I told them I will order this suit for the next climb, and this is the exact size I want. So, because I don't want to come here and try to hire a suit, and then you have to settle for the next one that is available and is not the best quality. Um, the second question was navigation. It wasn't a big issue. When we were leaving, we had loaded GPX maps on the watches, but then we realized it wouldn't even have helped much because the route on these mountains they change every season or they deviate most of the seasons because of the glaciers and those crevasses and all. But most of the way there were fixed ropes, so we could follow fixed ropes. And of course, being you are climbing in snow, there are a lot of steps that are ahead of you, but mostly we were following the fixed ropes. And the next one was, sorry. Oh, the physiology. I don't think I have any visible or evident.
What about your hand?
Oh, now. Now about the hand, in 2021 I had frostbite on amadablam and I had two surgeries after that that led to shortening of a few fingers. But on this climb, because of that, the skin is very soft. It was quite irritated, and I have a few blisters and a few wounds because of on the areas that the surgery happened. So I'm healing some wounds from that. But after this, I will not have any shorter hands or shorter fingers. Nothing will be lost that hasn't been lost already. So we are good. Yeah.
Any other questions? Probably to ask, is there any reason the season for Manaslu is in autumn and the initial summits were in spring, then it seems to have shifted to autumn? Is there any reason?
Yeah, actually, the best season to climb Manaslu is the spring season. That is April, May, but that is the same season for Everest. So a lot of resources are committed to Everest. So most shepherds are serving their clients in Everest. These the commercial companies are all their helicopters are in Everest. Everybody is on Everest. So they shifted the season to autumn, which is more, the weather is not as stable as the summer, but I mean spring, but because of resources allocation, then the climb happens in October, September, October. Yeah. Yes.
I don't think I need a mic, but to complete your story, could you please tell us in which camp you made your soup in which tent you made your soup in Camp 4? I can't get it out of my mind. When you came down,
When
you
we
go back to the Russians' tent?
oh no, when we came back down,
Yeah.
oh, where we made our soup.
Yeah.
No, we made the soup. What happened was we couldn't go back to borrowing tents again. So what we did, the wind was coming from one side, so we went to one of the tents on the other side, just outside the tent, and sheltered ourselves and made our soup right outside the tent, but a bit hidden from the wind. We didn't want to again go back to borrowing the tents. Yeah.
Did you take any medication for altitude?
Yes, we did take what is it, Diamox? Yeah. I took 2 tablets at Camp 4 after the hyperventilation event. Uh, Chariot took 4 tablets at base camp after the first acclimatization, and he had that pulmonary thing, and 2 tablets at camp 4. So yes, we took Diamox for
So how many days was it in total from time from the start to the end?
10 days. We started climbing on the 15th, we summited on the 25th. Yeah, 10 days. From the time we arrived at base camp on 14th, we started climbing on the first acclimatization 15th, we summited on 20, I think 25th, yeah. So 10 days total. Yes?
Beginning to end, like arriving day one.
The total trip time.
Yeah.
The road trip time was we arrived in Kathmandu 9th September. Chariot left on 28th of September. I left on 2nd of October. After the summit, we went back to base camp. We had two options: to get a helicopter ride to Kathmandu. By that point, we were ready to pay for the for the helicopter ride. It's $350 per person. It is not an emergency. So, but when we arrived, I even told the guy, get us a helicopter. I was even ready to pay for chariot if we didn't have the money. But then we were told there was a backlog of 3 days. So helicopters could not access base camp for 3 days prior because of the weather. So we had to wait for that backlog to be complete for us to get a space. So we decided to trek down for another 3 days. Yeah. And by the way, we arrived at Kathmandu earlier than most of the people who were waiting for the helicopters, because after that there was another day that they couldn't go and they had to wait again, and there are more people coming from from the summit. So, but some people said they can't walk down, so they had to wait for the heli, however long it took.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I think two questions, and I would like to satisfy a myth I have. So, question number one: done properly, how many days can you cut? Can it be done faster? And then question number two is, what was the diet like when you're up there? What were you eating? Then my myth is, I think a mustache is really important.
Sorry? Your myth is? Sorry?
Looking at your face and your
Uh-huh.
I've always believed a mustache is really important on high.
Okay, the first question was, can it be done faster? Yes, it can be done faster. It just depends on how acclimatized and your experience. Nims didn't acclimatize. He arrived at the mountain and went straight to the summit. Like, arrived, went to camp one, slept, camp two, slept, like just a continuous. He had some clients who were on oxygen, but he wasn't on oxygen. But that was his 41st 8,000. So there is also some experience required there. But even for us, I think if you acclimatize faster, then I believe you can do it faster. But I think for us, we were a bit worried because we didn't know how we will be at 7,800, 7,900. Probably when you're doing your 40th 8,000, you know exactly how you will feel. We didn't know how we will feel, and we didn't want to find out when it was too late. Yeah. Diet. Now, I'm normally not heavy, but I lost a lot of weight. Cheriot lost weight. We were surviving on noodles, ready to mix soups and sneakers. There was nothing much. Because when we are carrying our stuff up there, you have to look for something that is light to carry, quicker to make, and those were we had one or two trail foods, but they were a bit heavy, so we were just surviving on noodles, Snickers, and soups, and of course hot water. And the myth, whether having a mustache on the mountain is better, I think yes. Because also it filters a lot of snow that blows into your face. Yes, I think probably yes. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
I have three questions. The first one, if you are comfortable, what is the estimated cost of the whole hike? Second,
It's not a hike; it's a climb. No, it's alright. It's alright.
how many kilometers did you cover for the whole hike?
Uh-huh.
And the last question, what's the most memorable thing? Like, what's the most memorable thing about that hike?
Okay. Cost. Um, I'll start with the normal costs. When we asked some of these outfitters to give us the cost for Manaslu, the lowest quoted $13,000. Now that was like a full with shepherds with um, what oxygen, and we tell them no, we don't want oxygen. Then they tell us the lowest they can go is $11,000. But we did without oxygen, we did without shepherds. So for the permits and getting our logistic guy to get us to base camp and back to Kathmandu, we paid him $6,000 each. And then now hiring the equipment, the suits and everything came to about $1,200 each. And then we had insurance. We paid $150 each for the insurance. I think total came to about $9,000 each. Yeah. And the other question was the total kilometers. I think the whole expedition, we hiked about the approach to base camp was actually a hike, not a climb. The approach to base camp was about 80, 70, 80 kilometers, and then spread over 4 days, no, 3 days. And then from base camp to the summit and all that, probably we covered around 20, 25. Because from base camp to the summit is only 10 kilometers actually. And then now going back on the other route, because we did like a circuit, we didn't go back the same way we came. We covered around 85 kilometers back to where we could get a vehicle back to Kathmandu. And that was covered in 3 days also. Yeah. And the most memorable, I wish Serious was here because I wanted to. When there's that point, the last handle before you get to Camp 2. It was an interesting section for most people, and at some point, the second time we climbed it 3 times. The first time, because when the first time we got to Camp 1, we actually went up and then went down, and then the next time we went now all the way, and then we took our tent to Camp 2, pitched it, and went back to base camp. So we did that section 3 times. I think there was a point where Chariot let go of his Juma because it was because of guys stepping on ice for so long, that overhang became quite difficult to overcome. So it got to a point whereby you couldn't even reach the ice with your. If you look at there's the third time we climbed, the rope was moved to a new area because that area was becoming impossible to climb. So there was a time he let go of the Jumar and he couldn't get over that overhang. So at some point now he dropped his bag. I told him to drop his bag because now it was, and then pulled. I was up already, so I tried to pull him, and then one shepherd came and told me never do that because, like, never try to pull someone from, from up because you will actually follow. You'll actually fall, and you're creating big problems for yourself. So it was an interesting moment and also a learning moment because we are not experienced in these things, and these guys are so much experienced. So when he came and then he actually took his time to tell me exactly why I shouldn't do that, and he showed me how I should do it. I should actually make like an anchor and just not pull him with my Jumar like that, but there's a way to do it. So that was a good learning moment. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Yeah.
My name is Alfaro. Please forgive my ignorance for people who've never ascended to Kenya, Kilimanjaro, Rwenzori,
It's all right.
for that matter. How would you compare the experience with the challenge of Manaslu vis-a-vis Kenya, Rwenzori? These are the mountains that are accessible to us via motors,
uh, they are two different sports. I think the one place that you come close to the bigger challenge of Everest, I mean Manaslu, or it's Rwenzori, because there's that's a glacier walk that you do for like an hour. So that is probably the closest we will come to. But then on Kilimanjaro, you have now the altitude and that summit ridge where you walk on that ice on that altitude. That is a bit comparable, but for a very short section. But of course, if everyone has to start somewhere, so I would say Mount Kenya is challenging in its own way, especially if you're climbing like Batian, because you don't climb with fixed ropes and everything. Even on Rwenzori, you don't use fixed ropes, right? On Manaslu, you are using fixed ropes most of the way. Here, you're not using fixed ropes. You're using those, So they're a bit different. They are quite different actually. But the closest you will come to that experience is Rwenzori. Yeah. Yes.
that assumption that you already to Rwenzori and use strokes.
Okay.
But anyway, I think you are.
If you ever climb Rwenzori, that will be the closest. Yes. All right, thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm curious if you know how many other people have done it this way that you guys have done it without oxygen, without Sherpas. Did many people that do it this way?
I honestly don't know. I know most people, a lot of people have done without. Sorry?
It's 100.
152. Okay.
Before you.
So no 150.
So that's now 150.
Okay. Limo says he has done his research. It's 152. It's 152 without oxygen. Without shepherds, I'm not sure. because I also realized most of the people, even these professional climbers, like there were guys who were chasing speed records, they had shepherds. They had tents set up, they had shepherds. They didn't have oxygen, they were trying for speed records. But so I don't know how many did without shepherds, but a lot of people who do without oxygen, they also use shepherds. Yeah.
Shepherds claim
And and yeah, shepherds climb alone without, but they use oxygen actually. From camp 3, even when they are